Hello, welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. Today is going to be a little bit of a quick hit episode. I've been traveling the whole weekend, haven't been able to do a lot of prep, so we're going to walk through the top 10 here at the box office for the weekend of June 21st to the 23rd. I won't go as in-depth as normal, but we'll still go in depth. We'll still get pretty wonky. So we're going to talk about Toy Story 4, Child's Play. Those are the two new wide release openers. We had a third one, Anna, didn't even make the top 10. So that one's already a flop, right? So we'll do our normal walk through the top 10 here, maybe some stuff outside the top 10, and then figure out what's going on the rest of June and into July. I mean, the big story this weekend, of course, is Toy Story 4. And so I have been following that one very closely over the weekend. I was looking for numbers Thursday night. They came in. They're a little bit low. The Friday stuff started to come in, the matinees, and people were like, I don't know what's going on here. It doesn't seem to be really getting in close to where tracking was having it. And it did end up here this weekend at $118 million for the 3-day weekend domestically. Now, recall that tracking for Toy Story was very high. We were looking at, but also a big range. Disney themselves said 140. Now, if Disney says 140, that is the low ball estimate of what's going to happen. Because remember, studios always lowball their estimates so that Sunday and Monday they get really good press saying, oh my God, this movie overperformed so much. We said 140, it did 160. That was the expectation here for Toy Story. The expectation was that it was going to hit about 160 to 170 to 180, I think is where a lot of people ended up. And now this is industry data. This is not just fanboys. This is not adult Disney cultists saying, oh, this thing's going to be $180 million, $200 million. There was talk of that within the industry from experts that Toy Story was going to get to those heights, to the Incredible 2 sort of height, and maybe break the animation record for opening weekend. That did not happen. It came in at 118 in a super saturated wide release, 4,575 theaters, a per theater average of $25,800. Now, normally when we're talking about a movie breaking the $100 million mark on opening weekend, it's a massive success. In this case, now here's the people have been going back and forth on the nerd forums this weekend about what this performance means. So let's walk through the scenario here, or walk through the reality of the situation. Toy Story 4 is not a flop. That's not going to happen. It's not flopping. A flop would have been like $60 million, ending up at like under $200 million domestically. And even then it might have broke even. But this is not a flop. But this is a significant underperformance. Now, the expectation here is this thing was going to cruise past 150. I think most people thought by Wednesday of last week that we were looking at probably 165 would have been a good guess with what the data was saying and what the sort of industry at large was tracking. 118 is not even close to that. So something happened here between expectations, tracking data. Now, keep in mind, I got to reiterate this over and over again because I heard this a lot on the forums this weekend about people sort of making the argument that, well, 118 is a really good opening. You're right, it is a good opening. But that has nothing to do with the data that was leading up to this weekend saying that it was going to do much better than this. And that is a significant sort of difference. Is Toy Story 4 going to lose money? Absolutely not. It's going to make money. Keep in mind 118, okay, fine. It's a depressed opening weekend. That means its multiplier is probably going to be pretty high. Incredibles 2 at a 3.3, I want to say. A basement multiplier for this is going to be 3x. Basement. My guess is probably 3.2 because it is a third sequel here. It's probably not going to have like a 3.4, 3.5. It could, though. It could definitely do that. So I would say basement for this, you're looking at 360 to 380 would be a good sort of lower end of what this is going to do domestically. And then on up, it could break 400 pretty easily because it is a Disney children's film this summer. And it didn't really pop off on that much this weekend. People could just be waiting until next weekend to see this. It was a very nice weekend throughout the country. In a lot of places, it was warm where I was in Wisconsin. So people were not going to the theater Saturday, I'll tell you that much. Okay, so But all that within context, let's quickly take a look at some of the scores here for this movie, just to see what might have depressed the opening a bit. Quality wise, this thing's a home run. 98% Rotten Tomatoes from 300 critics. 300 critics. 90% of them gave this a fresh score. Actual score is 8.38 out of 10, which is outrageously high, or an 84 essentially out of 100. If you saw that on Metacritic, you'd be like, wow, this is like a high art film. So critics adore this film. Audience score is equally as good. I think this is one of the highest verified audience scores I've ever seen on Rotten Tomatoes. 95% from 11,000 verified viewers of the film, or at least verified purchasers of tickets, with an actual score out of 5 stars of 4.7 out of 5. So there's no quality issue here. This is a grand slam in terms of quality, which makes the performance seem a little bit more strange. Like, why did this underperform so significantly to what the data was telling us this thing was going to do? And that's going to be the big question this entire weekend. I don't think that, or this entire week, I should say, I don't think that, and is it a bigger question about this summer? I think that's a lot of the early reads I've been taking a look at today have been sequelitis, right? This is another sort of problem. This is another Godzilla. This is another Dark Phoenix. This is another Shaft. This is another Men in Black International. I don't know if it fits that narrative as well. Something didn't click here and didn't go right. And I'm not really sure what that is. In terms of a cinema score, an A. Everything I'm seeing around Tomatoes could have been an A+. I mean, it's that good of a film. So the multiplier here is at least a 3. So 360 is essentially locked domestically. So it's going to make money. It's not a flop. Don't let anybody tell you this movie's a flop. But also don't let anybody tell you that this movie is performing to expectations, because it's not. This is an underperformance. And so if we're trying to figure out just very, kind of hot take, it's opening weekend, what really happened here? If this had opened at like 130, 140, I would have said like maybe weather, maybe people were going to wait and see it. Maybe, they're waiting until the 4th of July holiday to see it. It's all possible. 118 is low enough where I think something went wrong. And I don't really know, like if we break it down into 2 different buckets like I normally do, at least on the product side, I do product quality and product conception. Conception is, does this idea even make sense? Why are you making it? I want to leave that one to the side for right now, because I think that might be an interesting topic. Product quality is clearly, this is an A+. This is like top tier material here. So product quality is not a question at all. This is an amazing film, objectively, you can say, by audience standards and critical standards, which you don't often see. So that's not an issue. That bucket is not in play here. What is in play is product conception. And what I mean by that is, why are you making this film? Why now? Is there an inherent hook in the development and concept of the film that's going to get people to come out? And I think we already see a little blind spot here with the product conception. Why are we doing a 4th Toy Story film? The 3rd one was fantastic. It's beloved. It was a perfect bookend to the series of the trilogy. Why are we coming back again? I think that's going to be a big question mark over this entire project as it runs through its performance here. I think the expectation was, 150. I think basement. I mean, let's go with what Disney had said, 140. So if we did 140, a baseline for that, you're looking at 450, 462 domestically. I don't think it's going to get anywhere near that. So that is an underperformance. Now, I think what, from the product conception side, to continue that a little bit, is people weren't necessarily clamoring for another Toy Story movie, were they? I had forgotten that it was coming out. Another issue here that we have to look at, and maybe this is more on the marketing side of things, is the release date. This thing is jam-packed into, we got Lion King coming out later this summer. We've got Aladdin already crushing it. I mean, Aladdin is doing so well. So that is such an overperformance to expectations that it was kind of sandwiched in a bit. And there's tons of stuff out there right now. In terms of like children's films, Secret Life of Pets opened up 3 weeks ago. So that might have taken a little bit off of this. there's nothing else from the children's film sort of realm that I think would really hurt this. I guess the last big children's film was it couldn't have been Dumbo. That was 13 weeks ago. So there wasn't a ton of competition in that children's animation realm outside of Secret Life of Pets 2, which is a pretty big competitor, I would say. But I think, if you had to choose between the two, I think parents and kids would probably choose Toy Story 4 just because it's so beloved, such a beloved series. And Secret Life of Pets 2, no one even likes the first movie, even though it made like $1 billion or more than $1 billion, a lot of $1 billion. So it felt, but I do think that there's a problem here with that post Aladdin. We're 5 weeks out from Aladdin. And then when the hell is Lion King coming out? I think a few weeks or sometime over the summer. So maybe it was too soon after Aladdin. It does feel really soon after that. One main reason is that Aladdin was a remake of a 90s film. Toy Story 1 came out in the 90s, so they kind of cross over in that 90s nostalgia feel. And I wonder if that didn't sort of depress this opening a bit. But the thing that people keep coming back to, and I keep coming back to thinking about this film as someone who's follows the industry, pretty constantly and obsessively, is why are we doing a fourth movie of Toy Story? Why aren't you doing like an offshoot? And it also, the marketing made it kind of feel like a retread. In the same way, to a much lesser extent, as Men in Black International. Two movies that the originals came out in the 90s were huge hits in the 90s. And these new, I guess both fourth movies, if I'm thinking about it, in the series, don't really do anything all that new in terms of how they were presented to the audience. Now, clearly you look at the quality of Toy Story 4. Critics love it. Audiences love it. So it did something very, very right. But in the marketing of it, and maybe the legs are going to be massive on this. Maybe it does a 4x multiply. It's totally possible. But we're talking about opening weekend and why it's so depressed. That's probably a marketing issue too, where it just did not hook people in. And what have I been saying for the last, it's been most of this year, after Booksmart and now after Late Night, and after sort of Godzilla not doing well, Dark Phoenix not doing well, Shaft bombing. I mean, it's been a summer of bombs. We've had wins, Aladdin. We've had Rocket Man's doing great. John Wick 3 is doing great. We'll talk about those in a bit. But we've had a kind of more bombs than wins. And I think one of the main culprits here is that, and the industry insiders will say, or people who say, well, streaming, it's so hard to compete with streaming. You're right, it is hard to compete with streaming. Streaming is growing year over year, streaming movies, streaming TV, 30% year over year. It's an insane growth rate. People love their Netflix. They love their Hulu. It's cheaper. It's easier. It's more comfortable. If you're thinking about a one-to-one comparison, that's going to kill you in terms of marketing a movie, because you're not going to win. You're not going to win, for instance, if somebody's interested in seeing the new season of Handmaid's Tale. It's Friday night. They're getting off of work. Or they want to go see Late Night. What are they going to do? Like, they're going to see Handmaid's Tale. Like, they're going to have to sit at home and watch Hulu and watch like 3 or 4 episodes and really enjoy it and have a good time watching it. Well, no one has a good time watching that show, but like, you know what I mean? You're not going to win. So you have to play up the differences in what you get in a theatrical experience versus sitting at home in your PJs watching Hulu or watching Netflix. And I think that's what the thing I've been talking about, spectacle marketing. Like, just saying we did another Toy Story movie is not enough. You need to show why it's special, show why it's amazing, and create a sort of spectacle. And what that spectacle does is create this need for people, I must see this in the theater. That's what people have to say to themselves multiple times before they're going to go out and buy a ticket to see this opening weekend. I must see this in the theaters. And so if you look at the numbers, Toy Story 4, I mean, just throwing some, I'm spitballing here a little bit, but like $118 million. Let's say the average ticket cost is what? It's technically the average ticket cost is like $9.16, but opening weekend, it's a lot higher than that. Let's just say it's $12 per, or let's say it's like, I don't know, $10 to $12. So essentially 10 to 12 million people in the United States and Canada went out to see Toy Story 4 this weekend. what was the amount of people that didn't go to a movie this weekend and stayed home and watched streaming or watched something on cable or broadcast HD TV for the old folks? It's such a small group of people that are going out to the theater that are driving this revenue that you really have to engage these people on a higher level than you would to get them to watch something on streaming, to get them to just sit at home and watch YouTube. There has to be spectacle involved. And I think that was one of the downfalls here with Toy Story 4. It kind of, oh, we're back again. They already had that barrier to get over because everybody thought it was over at 3 and it was a really good ending. Oh, they're doing a fourth one. Okay, cool, whatever. Like maybe I'll catch it like week 3, week 4, maybe when it gets on VOD, maybe when it hits digital, or if you're still on a DVD player or something like that, or maybe I'll wait until it's on the Disney Plus streaming service, which is going to start in the fall. There's such a barrier to get people over that just the name alone and sort of the branding that was like, oh, it's another Toy Story movie, it's just not enough. And it wasn't enough in the way that like John Wick is a win this summer, because there's just this Keanu spectacle thing happening now that people are just so on board with him as a person and a movie star and just like a good person. He's like the millennial action star because he's older obviously, but for millennials they like him a lot. Because he's like this really cool, laid-back guy who seems incredibly nice and helpful to other people. He doesn't kind of seem like a dirtbag celebrity. And with the new movie coming out, there was a spectacle behind it because people really wanted to support Keanu Reeves in this new John Wick movie. When you think of other big wins, Aladdin was a spectacle because, I don't know why, because people thought like it's a live-action version of the original. The Guy Ritchie sort of element created this sense of like suspense, like, is this going to be terrible? And like all the memes about Will Smith earlier this year and how terrible that looked. I think there was almost this like some rubbernecking with that movie, trying to see if it was going to be a disaster or not. But it felt like I hate to bring in politics with this. Any press is good press, right? Like if you create just this inherent awareness about your product and your film, it's going to get people to read more about it, whether it's good or bad. And when they read more about it, they become more engaged in the actual film itself. And that makes them more likely to actually put down money and go see it opening weekend or week 2. And we just didn't have that sort of meme spectacle hype with Toy Story 4 at all. And so I think that's the main reason why it's opening at 118. Now, my guess is that the legs on this are just going to be outrageous. I was saying 3.2, 3.3, but the more I think about it and look at these numbers, I'm thinking like a 3.4, 3.5. I think this thing's going to cruise past $400 million, no problem, because word of mouth is going to be off the charts on this. So I think, it's a really weird story, Toy Story not doing so well. On the one hand, it kind of continues this narrative about the summer not being all that strong, which is so bizarre because I thought this summer was going to be absolutely amazing. It felt so stacked. But most of these movies are just underperforming. But Toy Story 4, I think, is going to be... It's going to be maybe kind of reminds me a little bit of maybe Spider-Man Homecoming. Was that last year? 2 years ago, probably. Where it opened up kind of in this range, actually. I want to say like 117, 113. Kind of depressed compared to expectations for comic book movies, but ended up having this sort of magical run over the summer. I think that's probably what's going to happen in Toy Story 4, just because the quality is too good for this thing not to have like a 3.3 multiplier. So I think it's a weird story. It's an odd narrative right now. It's certainly underperforming. It's not even coming close to expectations for opening weekend, but I think in the long run, it's going to be a smash hit. And I think it's going to, net a Disney $150-200 million in profit easily when those worldwide grosses come in. And someone was mentioning on another show that I was listening to when I was driving that Toy Story 4 had the third highest opening ever in Mexico. Don't quote me on that, but this might be a situation too where international really helps it out a lot. So I think it's an interesting story, because if this had done 140, 150, it kind of would have been boring. Like, oh yeah, of course, like it's Toy Story 4. Now there's this element of suspense and surprise to it. Like, how is this thing going to play out over the summer? If for some reason, and I don't see this happening, if this goes below a 3x multiplier, then there's a much bigger problem happening with this film and this series that I didn't see, but I don't think that's going to happen. So that's why sort of it's supposed to be a quick show, but I'm like rambling per usual. So we'll see how long this thing's going to go. So Toy Story 4 was number one with 118. I expected to go past $400 million and have a good multiplier. So I think the disappointment here is going to be quite short lived with this movie. Number two was Child's Play, the remake of the 80s slasher movie. Child's Play was always one of those 80s films that creeped me out because the doll's just creepy. I mean, Chucky's just like the creepiest little thing. And growing up in the 80s and in the 90s, it was on like USA and cable TV constantly. And it just always freaked me out. So I've never been a huge fan of this series despite being a horror nerd. So this one was, I think, a joint release here. So the releasing, well, let's get the numbers out of the way. $14 million for the weekend, which is okay. Not fantastic. It was tracking a little bit higher in the 16 range. So it's not that far from tracking. So it's an okay performance. Opened in 3,000 theaters. Per theater average was essentially $4,700 per theater, which is not all that strong. But the budget on this was $10 million. I want to say this was a Blumhouse movie. Am I wrong about that? I could be wrong about this. It is getting released by United Artists Releasing, which is a joint thing between Annapurna and MGM. We've talked about them a lot this year because they screwed up the Booksmart release and they also screwed up the late night release. And then maybe they screwed this one up too. I don't know. Audrey Plaza's been everywhere this week. She was on like I got Conan. She was on that Wing show, whatever the hell it is, Hot Ones or something. She's been all over the place. She's a great guest to have on and a great sort of PR person. There's always something viral about what she's doing when she's on these shows. So rated R horror. Obviously, if you're not familiar with the original, it's like a demon possessed doll that a mother buys for her kid, and there's chaos ensues. The original came out in 1988, which is a lot later in the 80s than I thought. November 11th, 1988. I would have guessed like 84 or something. It did 6.5 million. This is not adjusted. Can we get adjusted here, folks? What are we doing? Let's get adjusted. Okay, adjusted. Not that much higher, actually. Crazy. Whoa, this is so weird. So the original opened at 14 million as well. Adjusted to today's numbers, closed out at 72. And that's where you can see the difference between the 80s and 90s or 80s and now in terms of horror films and multipliers. So it opened up at 14, closed out at 72. Let's take a look. I can't do mental math, so we're going to do it. That's a 5x multiplier. No fucking way in hell is that ever going to happen to a horror film right now, unless it's Get Out, which I think did 5x or something. It doesn't happen with horror films. Horror films are lucky to get like a 2.5x multiplier. If they hit 3, that's like a grand slam. So back in the 80s, it was more like kind of like a roadshow model where it would do well in like 600 cities and you'd keep expanding. And that's how we get like a 5x multiplier for a movie like Child's Play. It was back then, this was a huge hit. It wasn't made for a lot of money. So these both opened at 14. Let's look at the second one. That opened up in November 1990, 2 years after the original. That opened at 22 adjusted, closed out at 60. Big win for them. And then the third one was a year later. Not even a year later, like 8 months later. Well, not 8 months, 9 months later. In August of 1991, opened up at 12, closed it at 32. Universal basically, squeezed everything they could out of this lemon and got all the juice out. And by the third one, no one ever wanted to see this ever again. Although there was a reboot of this, and I don't see it here. I think it was like Bride. Yeah, Bride of Chucky. Yeah. That was 1998. I totally forgot about Bride of Chucky until I thought about like the series ending. And I was like, wait a second, wasn't there another one in the 90s? Bride of Chucky came out in 1998. So 7 years after the third one came out, opened up at 22, closed out at 61. Not a bad performance. Not a bad performance at all for that. That's adjusted as well. So this one opens up at 14. It's got Audrey Plaza and it's a reboot. The quality, let's take a look at this. I haven't seen these scores yet. Ooh, these are not looking too good. Rotten Tomatoes score 61% from critics, 100 reviews. By the way, the doll looks terrible in this, and everybody said that in the marketing and the trailers. I'm just looking at some still photos. It looks so trash. But critics don't like it very much. 61%, 5.9 out of 10 as the actual score, of 59 out of 100, if you will. Here's where the big concern is. Audience score of a 64% on Rotten Tomatoes, verified score. So people who bought tickets to see this gave it 64%. That's bad. That's really, really bad. People are not liking this movie. Cinema score of a C+, also pretty terrible. And they say people score horror films lower. That's fine, but that's why they have lower multipliers. So this thing is not going to go anywhere, unfortunately. It doesn't seem like. Opens up at 14. Closes out probably, let's say 2.5 to be nice. $35 million domestically. I don't think there's going to be a huge international audience for this either. But it was shot for $10 million. I gotta wonder, the marketing seemed pretty intense on this, so I don't know where the marketing is going to come down. It kind of feels like a push, maybe a small profit. I think it's going to do well on VOD and digital streaming. I would feel like it just feels like one of those movies that, like, unless you're a super big horror person, you're not going to rush out to see this in a theaters opening weekend or second weekend. I think it's an okay performance. It didn't break out. It didn't necessarily flop huge either. It's kind of a middle of the road situation. What's really going to be tell the story here is that drop second weekend. If it's above a 60% drop, that's pretty terrible. And then it might be towards the underperformance floppage territory. But right now it's kind of right in the middle. So that was number 2. 3 was Aladdin. I mean, this is like, there's movies every year that do this. Jumanji comes to mind. Hidden Figures was one. Greatest Showman was kind of running parallel with Jumanji that one year, where the drops are insane. We're in the 5th weekend of Aladdin. It did 12.12 million this weekend. 12.2 million this weekend. Its drop was 29%. I gotta have a feeling that that's hurting Toy Story 4. I just really do, because this thing is at 287 right now. Worldwide, it's got to be absolutely massive. Let me just double check what it's doing worldwide. But these drops are just magical drops. Like, this is just like, it's going to run forever. It's going to run until whenever Lion King comes out. Worldwide, you're sitting at $800 million. Production budget on this is 183. That seems a little bit low, but I'm just going to do a little back of the napkin math here and see this thing's already profitable. This thing's way past profitable. This thing probably cost about half $500 million to put out. And it's already sitting on revenue. And this is revenue through like its entire life cycle, all the way to like basic TV. You're looking at probably, it's already sitting in like $150 million to $200 million profit. So, Aladdin's it's a huge win for Disney, and I think a massive surprise to me specifically, just because there was all of that bad buzz surrounding the production of the movie and the quality of it. But then when it finally came out, critics hate this movie, by the way, but audiences love it. I want to see the Rotten Tomato, a verified audience here, and see what it says. So it's 57% from critics now, just a fresh score. And the verified audience score is 94% from 50K ratings. That's why I love this verified audience score, because it's going to keep updating as people see it. I think it's actually gone up from opening weekend, where it was like 93%. So this is one of those movies where critics don't like it. It's probably not a great movie, but there's something about it that people in the masses are really enjoying. And maybe it's nostalgia. Maybe it's just the song choice or something. I don't know what it is, but people are eating this thing up. And you can see that in this low drop, 29% for the weekend. So right now, Aladdin's probably the biggest win of the summer so far. Just a great performance. 4 was Men in Black International on second weekend. 10.7 million, a 64% drop. That's a horror movie drop. This thing's flopping. I mean, this is becoming a pretty big flop. So it's at $52 million so far domestically. That drop is so severe. I'm going to take a look at what's doing international, though. So it's at 182 international. This thing is going to lose some real money, which isn't that big of a surprise. Again, why are we making this? What's the impetus? What's the major hook that's going to get the people to spend $15 to see it opening weekend or the second weekend? It's just not there. And 64% is just a horrific drop for this. That was for number 5 was Secret Life of Pets 2. 10.2 million, a 58% drop for a children's film on its third weekend. This is the second terrible drop it's had. Sits at 117. That's going to be a really significant underperformance, I think, for that film. Not the end of the world, though, just because it was only shot, created for 80 million, probably a massive marketing budget. Let's see how that's doing worldwide and see if it has a good chance to make up some of that money. Yikes. I hope it is not opened on most of its foreign markets. Worldwide, it's sitting just shy of 200 million. That's not good at all. I'm gonna keep an eye on that one, because that could shift from like a middle of the road performance to kind of underperformance flaw. It's certainly underperforming to expectations by Universal and the industry, but does it keep going down to the point where it might lose some money? I'm not gonna like talk to that yet, but I think that it could be a possibility that these drops continue that way and it doesn't really take off internationally, which it hasn't done yet. Okay, that was 5. Number 6 was Rocket Man. 5.6 million, a healthy 40% drop. Not like an outrageously good drop, but a pretty good drop. Lost 600 theaters per theater average in its fourth weekend, $2,300. Total take so far for Rocket Man, 77 million. That one should get past that 90 million mark. I think that's going to be a big win for Paramount. Kind of a little more of a surprising win, I feel like. I thought like the Bohemian Rhapsody thing, it would have been too soon after that. Like it's kind of, maybe the audiences felt like they're cashing in on another musician biopic. But people are showing up for that one. So number 7 this weekend was John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum. 4 million. Great drop. 36% drop. Now sits at $156 million. Just here in the US and Canada in its 6th weekend. Aladdin, John Wick 3 are huge wins for the summer so far. Number 8 was another flop. We have 3 flops in a row. Godzilla, Dark Phoenix, and Shaft. Godzilla did 3.7. Terrible 58% drop. Sits at 102 in its 4th weekend. Or 4th week, I should say. Number 9 was Dark Phoenix. 3.6 million. Terrible drop. 61% drop on its 3rd weekend. It sits at $60 million so far here in the US and Canada. Number 10 was Shaft with a 60% drop. Also terrible drop. 3.5 million. Ooh, sits at $15 million. I'll go $16 million. And its 2nd weekend. Ooh, that is rough. That is so bad. Okay, so that's your top 10. Anna was a new movie that came out that did 3.5 million, opened in 2,000 theaters. Per theater average was $1,600 in its opening weekend. I didn't really know much about this movie. Didn't see a trailer. Didn't hear any buzz about it whatsoever. Let's see here what it did quality-wise. 25% Rotten Tomatoes, so it's a terrible movie. Nobody even reviewed it. Which means it was super bad. They didn't even want to show up to see it. Verified audience score, not that bad, 81%. Is it being hacked? Possibly. Let's look at all audience score. 80%. So it doesn't look like there's a huge variation there. So the people who do end up going to see Anna, which is not many people, less than 1 million. Let's say, there's like what? We does 3.5. Let's just assume it's a $10 average. Probably like 350,000 people in the US and Canada went to go see that movie, which is higher than I thought people would go see that, just because there was no buzz around it whatsoever. Okay, that's the top 10 and 1. Let's quickly sort of wrap this up because I don't want to take too long. I am exhausted from driving so much. We did have some limited releases to talk about really quickly. A Wild Rose from Neon that opened up in 4 theaters. And we've been talking a lot about platform releases and limited releases with Booksmart and Last Black Man in San Francisco and Booknut. So you should have a good gauge about what's good and what's bad in terms of per theater average, and that 4 theater platform NYC LA art house opening, $14K per theater. That will absolutely not break out and go nowhere. I hear it's very good, but it's just there's just not, I don't know. It's just limited releases are tough. Wide releases are tough for anything that's not comic book and sequels aren't even an easy bit. Stuff like Shaft and Dark Phoenix and Godzilla and Men in Black are all flopping. I don't see how Wild Rose is going to take off on the art house scene. It's just not going to happen. It's a really tough market this summer for some reason. And 14K is not nearly good enough. You need to hit at least 40, well, let's say 30 to 40K per theater in that four theater opening to get the expansion that you want. And that, of course, doesn't guarantee you're going to do well in the expansion, but it gets you that. Wild Rose probably will not have that expansion because it's not doing so hot in New York and Los Angeles. Toni Morrison, same kind of story. The Pieces I Am, 4 theater opening, only 11K per theater. Not very good at all. And that's most of the limited releases that I'm seeing. Oh, The Souvenir also. I didn't know that came out. That's been out for a while. Didn't even make $1 million in 6 weeks. That's terrible. That's too bad. Any other limited releases that I'm missing? The Quiet One did open in 6 theaters, did $1,700 per theater. Horrific. Anything else to talk about? No, not really. Okay, so Echo in the Canyon, how's that one doing? 3,000 per theater. It's made $1 million so far. That's so niche that'll never break out. Okay, so that's most of the top 10 in a little bit. Last Black Man in San Francisco. Doing okay, 1.3 million so far. It's doing a really slow expansion. That's a smart move because I knew about this movie and I knew about its performance at Sundance and people really liked it, but I wasn't like super sold on seeing it. But first when it came out limited release, it's like, oh, it's doing pretty well. It's interesting. I've been hit by 3 weekends now of buzz about it on just Twitter and stuff, and now I really want to see it. So it works, and I'm the perfect audience for that movie. It's A24, it's an art house film, it's probably super edgy, it's about a city I used to live in. I'm one of the target demographics for that movie, and it took me 3 weekends of constant good buzz to even consider to go see it. So that's just the hard part of a platform release, but it does work. The Dead Don't Die also from Focus was limited. That's going nowhere. 4.7 million. Really weird release. It's 690 theaters on its opening weekend. And it's not really expanding. It's 77 more of this, so that's gonna go nowhere. That movie really split people too. Even the nerds are not really sure what to make of that movie. Okay, let's wrap this thing up because I'm tired. Let's do the release schedule really quick and see what's coming out. Yesterday is coming out this Friday. This Wednesday, Annabelle Comes Home opens up. That should be interesting. I don't know how well that one's going to do. It just doesn't seem like there's the same amount of buzz for that. I think the Conjuring universe is getting a little bit saturated with La Llorona this, when was it, January or March? It seems kind of soon after that, and do we need another Annabelle movie? This is the 4th Annabelle movie? Come on. There's been 4 Conjuring movies. I just don't get the feeling that it's going to do all that well. Yesterday could break out. They've done so in terms of marketing and stuff. I will have to call it Yesterday is doing a really, really good job. They've been, and I think maybe they've been scared by the performance of stuff like Booksmart, and maybe the sort of mid-tier movies are just not doing anything anymore at the box office. So I think they took an unorthodox approach with the marketing yesterday. I saw a spot where it was basically interviewing audience members about their love of the Beatles or something. It was a short 30-second hit, but it really was it worked, and it was oh, that's what that movie's about. Because the premise of the movie is kind of hard to get across. Oh, no one remembers the Beatles but except this one guy. Okay. It's a very bizarre premise. And so I think those kind of unorthodox spots where you talk about the Beatles and talk about people loving the Beatles helps get the audience engaged on 2 levels. It's 1, what the hell is this movie? Oh, now I know sort of what it's about. 2, oh, I love the Beatles, so I want to go see that. I think it's going to work pretty well. It's the best that they probably can do, but I think it might do okay. So it's 2,600 theaters this Friday. It's the only thing opening this Friday. And technically it's 4th of July weekend, sort of. So, I think it's going to do okay. Is it going to break out? I get a little tingle in my stomach that it might break out. It's Danny Boyle too. Everybody loves Danny Boyle. He's the ultimate sort of he can be the ultimate middle brow, like Slumdog Millionaire stuff. hit maker, but I mean, obviously I like his artier stuff. Like what is that? Sunshine? What a terrible movie. The Sunshine's a great movie until the ending, where it turns into a slasher movie, and you're like, what the fuck just happened? The first the first third of Sunshine's fantastic. The middle's like blah, and the last part is just terrible. But Danny Boyle, like, he does know how to make a crowd pleaser every once in a while, so that could be a win for him. Ophelia is also coming out in 50 theaters from IFC. I'm really interested in that one. I'm probably one of 10,000 people in the US and Canada that's interested in seeing this. Daisy Ridley plays Ophelia. And it's based, what is it? This is Shakespeare. What is this, Macbeth? I don't even know. I've had my master's in literature and I couldn't tell you what else. I have a painting of this in my apartment, but I don't even know what it's about. So that's not going to do anything, because I'm not going to go see that. If I'm not going to go see that, probably most people in the demographic are not going to go see that. I'll probably might catch it on VOD, but I'll probably wait till streaming on that just to check it out. Spider-Man then comes out next week, Thursday. Midsummer, I mean, that one's going to be so much fun to talk about. That has the buzz on that's off the charts, but it's all social media. People got invited to a special press preview, so that like skews everything to like super positive when it could be a train wreck. It's over 2 hours long. This one has cinema score of F written all over it, because it's going to be hyped, and people are hearing this hype and they're going to go see it, and it's going to be like Hereditary, which got like what, D+ on cinema score. I'll be interested to see the difference between like cinema score and verified audience score, because I am starting to see some correlation between the two. But I think Midsummer is gonna, and I called this like a month ago or 2 months ago. I was like, this thing's gonna pop off, and then general audiences are gonna start to taste it, and they're like, get this out of me. What is this? But the same thing is Hereditary. That happened Hereditary, but it also made $40 million at the box office for like a super arty or horror film. That's pretty freaking good. So I think Midsummer can probably repeat that sort of like shock value $40 million, $50 million domestic run. Spider-Man obviously is going to be massive, huge, probably what, 150 to $200 million opening. The 12th of July, we have Crawl and Stuber, I believe is one, action comedy. Crawl, look out for that one, folks. That one looks like a really fun horror movie about an alligator. It's the guy who did the Piranhas remake, which was so much fun. So then the trailer for that one looked fantastic. I mean, anybody who's like me, like young guys who are into horror movies, they're probably going to go see that. So I do think that's going to do quite well. Stuber, I couldn't get you a read on that. I just don't know. I don't know if the stars are big enough. I don't know if it looks funny enough in the trailers. It kind of feels like a flop to me. Oh, then of course Lion King does come out here on July 19th, which will be huge. It's kind of a quieter July. June was super stacked, but nothing really took off. Everything's been kind of flopping. July is very quiet. You have Spider-Man, like of movies that are going to break the $100 million opening. You know, you have Spider-Man, which will definitely do it. Lion King will definitely do it, and that's it. Breaking $50 million opening, nothing on here looks like it's going to do it. Once Upon a Time at Hollywood, maybe. Anything limited coming out that I should know about here? Not a ton. Art of Self-Defense looks kind of good from Bleecker Street, but that's like for art film nerds. Yeah, it's kind of a really quiet July besides those two peaks of Spider-Man and Lion King. God, it's really just like, you would think that they would stack up July a little bit more with how heavy June was. This summer might be in trouble. I thought this was a stacked summer, but now that I'm looking at it, this does not look very good. Okay, I'm going to look at August really quick before I sign off. Fast and the Furious, Hobbs and Shaw, that will be huge and massive on August 2nd. 9th, there's tons of movies coming out. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, that's going to be a big hit, I bet. Art of Racing in the Rain. Door in the Lost City comes out. The Kitchen comes out. 47 Meters Down on the 16th. Good Boys, The Informer. Those look pretty big. I think 47 Meters Down is going to be kind of a bigger hit, actually. after the crazy straight to VOD then to theater. Like, what of the original? And Mandy Moore? Like, what? That's so bizarre. Angry Birds 2, Blinded by the Light. I think Blinded by the Light, I don't want to say, it reminds me kind of a little bit of Yesterday, like a music pick about somebody who's really into a specific artist. I get the feeling that it could, the trailer looked really good. I'm really fascinated by the movie, but I don't know if the masses will be, but it does have a chance to break out. I do feel like it does. Playmobil, the movie's coming out on the 30th. STX, they gotta get their shit together, because like they keep putting out these trashy movies. My Spy by STX comes out on the 23rd of August. What the hell is that? Man, STX is gonna struggle to survive. They're not doing surefire wins, and it's just like they're gonna struggle. Okay, so that's through August. This is gonna be a freaking weird summer because it was super front loaded. We're going to have the 3 remaining peaks are going to be Spider-Man, Lion King, and Hobbs and Shaw. And maybe Dora the Explorer does really well too. But that's it. Summer's essentially over. By the time Scary Stories and Dora comes out on the 9th, I guess maybe 47 Meters Down might do okay. Summer's really winding down quick. But remember, the last 2 weeks of August are usually very dead. So the last peak we're going to have is going to be that opening weekend of August with Hobbs and Shaw. But this is going to be a rough summer, I can feel. I don't think it's going to do super hot, especially in July. Now, maybe Lion King is going to open to 200 and go on to make, $700 million domestically. I think that's probably in the cards. But it's not going to make up for all, like, the lack of scheduling in July and the sort of shit show that's happening in August. Like, why wouldn't you move Dora up into July? That doesn't make any sense. I guess you don't want to compete with Lion King, but Lion King can only eat up so much of an audience. Like, back in the 90s, they would stack 2 blockbusters every weekend in the summer. 2 blockbusters. And just, like, pop them off and be like, yeah, whatever. Like, they're going to see this weekend or next weekend. Like, there was a lot of confidence with, like... But now it's like everybody steers clear. If it's an MCU movie, no one wants the weekend before or after. If it's Lion King, no one even wants to come within 2 weeks of the movie. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, just because it's reinforcing this very top-heavy box office performance that we're seeing. It's very hierarchical, where nothing in the bottom can make any money. Nothing in the mids can make any money. Even other blockbusters can't make any money. So we'll see how this one plays out. So this has been kind of a quick hit episode, even though it's around like 40 minutes or something. It just goes to show you can talk about this stuff endlessly. In any event, thanks for listening, guys. We will be having a guest on the show here soon. One of my former podcast buddies, Chris. We used to do the Hot Song podcast together a couple of years back, and so he wants to get involved with this podcast. We're going to bring him on in some guest spots. It's going to be a lot of fun. So you hear another voice besides mine moving forward. It's going to be a good time. So thanks for listening, guys. I will be back next weekend. Take care.